Hey everybody, it's Commander Clyde, and welcome to a Smite update video today. So, first off, let me say we're going to have a little bit more than just a discussion about the new update for Smite. I'm going to talk about that for a little bit, and then we'll segue into the next topic, which is how the game has been done. English. How the game has been domed down and become a lot less interesting, more boring, which will then segue into a discussion about Duel and its state of eternal unbalance that will probably not change. So, first off, we've got skins. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. That's cool. I like this one. This is actually my favorite one. Anyway, don't care about that. Here it is, Odyssey items. Got all these skins from up here, and then the Dragon Priestess Nox bonus. Project Olympus stuff. Typing / block while in a private chat with another user will now block that user. Players on PC can now log out on the homepage. Haha. So you don't have to completely quit the restart the launcher to log into another account. Minimap icons for Minotaurs and Arena have been updated. Player gifting. It's the season of giving! In Smite Update 5.22, you'll be able to send gifts directly to other players. You can find this option in the shop, friends list, or end of match lobby. Send any player an email, voice pack, or skin accompanied by a short message. Keep an eye out for a more detailed player gifting post and FAQ, closer to launch day. Miscellaneous. Couple of new awesome chest items. More fantasy point store items. New loadout items. Titan Force Mirror Announcer. 1v1me Deathmark. Rental Fountain skin and Cubic Recall skin. Bug fixes. Fixed an issue where the portal in Arena would disappear before the screen fully faded to black during the victory/defeat segment. Fixed an issue where some ultimates with multiple fire instances, Raijin Kamizatsu, would get into buggy animation states when spamming. Fixed an issue where not all banners would load properly. Console fixed an issue where controller disconnect pop-ups would occur when they shouldn't or would occur but not be dismissible. Fixed an issue where controllers may fail to be detected. Fixed an issue where sometimes after logging in all inputs would be input twice. Fixed an issue where the ability builder was not functioning. God bugs. Artemis fixed an issue where her Mystic Archer skin would sometimes fire 2-star FXs with her basic attack instead of 1. Bakasura fixed an issue where Bakasura could eat deployables he should not be able to eat. Fixed an issue where Fenrir could use his ultimate's bite while using Aegis Amulet. Fixed an issue where Fenrir's Unchained would play the leap animation even if it was interrupted before it could fire. Thor, when aiming Thor's Tectonic Rift, enemies who will be hit by it will now highlight. Then item balance, just the one thing. Soul Reaver is currently too efficient at damaging enemies, especially in situations where the target is taking the maximum damage from this effect. We are reducing the top end potential with this item to bring it more into line. Decrease maximum health percentage damage. This item could do from 8 to 7%. It still doesn't do enough, in my mind, because imagine you have a Guardian that's got 3,000 health. If you get Soul Reaver, it does about 260 damage. That's a really insignificant amount, and Poly is stronger. Polynomicon, it does more damage. Significantly. Like, this item doesn't have much purpose except for the fact it has a lot of power. Anyway, God Balance. Since mid-season, Bakasura has been climbing in popularity and performance. We resolved a lot of clunkiness and gameplay flow issues, and since then, his insatiable hunger for enemies has been hard to stop. His passive really allows him to control the pace of the jungle in teamfights, making him difficult to oppose. With a 6% reduction, opposing junglers and carries will have a stronger opportunity to catch Bakasura out of position. Insatiable hunger. Decreased bonus attack speed and movement speed from 10% per stack to 8% per stack. Difference of 30% to 24. That's his passive. So when he kills a minion, he gets a stack. Bastet is the truest version of an ability-based assassin with powerful abilities that have longer animation times to justify their power. She is, however, bound by cooldown, limiting how often she can impact and threaten enemies in a teamfight. We are reducing the cooldown of Razor Whip to not only good spelling, to not only help her early game clear, but not increase her already strong gank potential, but to also allow her to threaten players more often in the late game. Decrease cooldown from 15 to 13 seconds. Erling Shin. Spot weakness has allowed Erling Shin to really efficiently build hybrid items to shred his targets. This ability is getting a scaling reduction to bring it more into line when built with this hybrid. Guys, can you... With hybrid offensive items, this does not need to be here. I swear, who writes these? Actually, Isaiah does. Boy, you gotta work on your spelling. In addition, Turtle Form is a powerful escape and engage tool with its powerful shield and knockup, although that's just a grammar thing. Turtle Form will move a bit slower, lowering Erling's overall mobility while trying to be defensive. Spot weakness, decreased physical power scaling from 15 to 10% per basic attack. 72 transformation, decreased Turtle Form movement speed. Turtle from... Come on, man. Turtle Form bonus movement speed from 100 to 75%. Freya. Freya was the only god to be 100% pick ban at the World Championships. Her strength mostly lies at higher skill levels. That's crap, but it is clear that she's overtuned. We feel like her new design has many advantages over the old one, but still requires some balancing. We're going to be toning down her range damage to help offset her other strengths most hunters don't have. Reduced range bonus damage from 20 to 15%. Magical power scaling. Reduced range bonus damage from 20 to 60 down to 16 to 60. What? I gives her a slight early nerf, but that's not much. Here, and the man of the hour. Mr. Mercury. Mercury and Golden Blade quickly became best friends, allowing Mercury to quickly clear any jungle camps with ease and dealing some heavy splash damage. While we feel Golden Blade is relatively balanced, when used with normal basic attacks, the interaction with Made You Look has proven to be too strong. With this interaction existing, Mercury either needs to rely on Golden Blade, or Golden Blade needs to be weak enough that it is only usable with Mercury. That's not true. I mean, it's not... I don't feel it's overtuned, but maybe it is because his pick rate's kind of high right now. Other than over-nerfed Golden Blade, Made You Look is getting a tweak on how it functions. While it can still crit, it will no longer trigger basic attack items and will now proc ability item effects. In a previous patch, we increased the cooldown of Made You Look to help keep his clear speed with Golden Blade in check, but with this change, we can reduce the cooldown back to 8 seconds. So, see, there's other items that proc that, and I cannot think of them at the moment. It'd be kind of funny for some of these. Wait, that means he can proc Hydras with his one. Oh no. Oh, we didn't think about that. He can proc Hydras with his one. Of course, you could do it with his 3, but that means you could get... How would that actually interact, though, if you hit multiple targets? I guess it wouldn't do anything. It would just set it up. for you to potentially be able to use it twice on someone versus the one time from grabbing them with your 3. So, I mean, that'll be interesting, actually. I kind of want to see how it interacts with Hydras. Anyway, moving on. Pele. Pele is an explosive assassin that has had a large impact on the game since her arrival. Her initiation, mobility, and damage feel well tuned, but there is one part of her kit that seems to really turn fights in unexpected ways. The sustain she gets from her passive. To that end, Everlasting Flame has had its cooldown increased from 20 to 30 seconds, and the ability Rely still has been reduced from 20% to 15%. And Sylvanas and Ymir get some quality of life. They get to run faster now. Yay! Sylvanas was really slow. That's bad. And also Shards of Ice has a increased slow of from 30 to 40%. Alright, and that being said, that segues back to what I was saying, particularly the Mercury change, segues back into the other idea I was going to discuss, which is how Hi-Rez for a couple of years now has had a consistent has consistently been dumbing the game down and making it less interesting. At first, this was a cool thing about Mercury, was that his one was a basic attack and it was cool. And there was another god that did that function that way, with an ability you could cast like with something you could cast like an ability that would hit like a basic attack. Cool, and people like that, and now they've killed it. They've taken it away from him. They've taken one of the interesting things about a character out of the game because of an item being too strong. So I guess it was only a matter of time until this happened, but it's kind of unfortunate. So I guess this points to the idea that Golden Blade and its predecessor Golden Bow were unbalanced in a way. So I don't know what that says, but I mean, if we go back and look at things like the change to Susanoo's passive a couple years ago, where they removed him getting movement speed for having abilities on cooldown, which was interesting. There wasn't a god like that. Encouraged you to use your abilities and do things because you could move faster, get out of the base quicker, do cool things. And now it's like you get extra power. Just boring, sad. They used to be that way with items too, but I think they made those a little better in that way, because they did this season come up with some interesting items that do cool things, and then some of them are just boring. They do easy things for you, like Book of the Dead. Build mana, get a shield based on your mana. So it's like, build mana. It's just like telling you, if you build this item, you should build mana. Telling you exactly what to do. So I guess you can do some weird theory crafting things there, but that's kind of boring. Also things that make the game boring, like lifesteal. Mages get a lot of lifesteal now. Mages have a lot of nice items right now that make them do lots of bad things to you. Make them really strong. Too much damage, too hard to kill. Gods like Baron that are incredibly difficult to kill and just make games last longer and make you have less fun in the long term. Which I guess it works out great for newer or less experienced players who aren't great at the metagame, and so they can just, I'll just pick a mage I mean, why would you not? Like, are you going to die? No. Do you do lots of damage? Yes. Do you have lots of sustain? Yes. Why would I not pick a mage? It's exactly the point. The game is not as fun as it used to be. Also, tanks are consistently getting into a state of unbalance again, where they used to be in Season 2. Of course, Season 2, the problem was itemization. Items were too strong. Tank and hybrid items were too strong at one point because you were getting a lot of protections and health at the same time. Which is not exactly fair because it makes you unkillable. Now tanks are getting unbalanced because they're tanks. That's it. Because items have come down, I think some of them have gotten overtuned. And so they become more dominant than they otherwise would have been if all else was equal. If you just made items less potent, and then that was it. They would be good at being tanky, but not much else. But tanks can still do a lot of damage. And there's a problem with that, obviously. Again, makes games boring, makes them last longer, makes you hate your existence. And that's very unfortunate for a game that has found a niche, this might being a third-person MOBA, things of that nature, you know. It's unfortunate to see the game itself become boring when the concept of it is very interesting. I don't think I did not come up with many, like, god changes, like passives, dumbing the game down, but there's a lot of them. I just can't remember them all at the top of my head. Susanoo is the one that sticks out in my mind because that was a real turning point with the game, and how Tyros seemed to want to cater toward new players, more who don't understand as much about the game. Of course, recently they've been a little bit better about that, although this Mercury change is not great, but you know, they've been nerfing things that needed to be nerfed. Gods like, for example, Artemis, that had stupid RNG-based passives, have been changed. Her passive is now, she does more damage to targets with her autos while they're CC'd, which is cool, and you can plan around it, plan and strategize around that better than you can an RNG passive. Like, you get percent crit chance. Yeah, that's cool. And with where they seem to be going for next season, they seem to be indicating they want to be better about taking the input of pros and experienced players into account more than they have in the past, which I think is good. They've got some cool God releases coming up, but they're not going to, you know, overload us with a bunch of God releases like they have recently. So that's good, I think. Good signs. They have good signs that they're trying to turn things around and make the overall experience of the game a little bit better for, you know, anybody, regardless of skill level and regardless of playstyle, which is always a good thing. Of course, that same boring, if I pick this God easy mode problem is, you know, one of the biggest issues with Duel. It's, of course, the game mode that I specialize in, I guess you would say. I mean, I play it the most right now. I'm one of those, although there was a point where I was a pretty heavy Conquest player. But that was a while ago, but, you know, I still keep up, or try to keep up with those things. But anyway, the inherent problem Duel has had is that certain gods are just easier to play, It can do things better than other gods. I mean, let's talk quickly about why hunters can be so dominant. Because most of their damage relies upon autos, i.e. the hold down left click and you can't lose idea, which is a lot easier. It's less skill based. I mean, you gotta aim, yes, and I'm personally not great at that. That's why I'm not a good hunter player. It's because I'm terribly inconsistent with autos. But for people that are, it's much easier because you can safely stand there and deal the majority of your damage. When you're an ability-based god, generally you have a few ways you can deal damage, but a lot of the time you're going to have at least one that's not totally safe and will result in you getting poked a lot, or you have to, or they of course are abilities that have cooldowns, and once you use them your damage is gone. For 100 that is not the case. Their abilities augment their inherent nature, which is to basic attack you. For example, gods like Honor, he's got an ability with a slow, and he's got one that you can use to hit people into a wall and stun them, which confirms more of your autos. His passive is also based around hitting your basic attacks, because you get the stacking pin for doing it. So it's all about that. If you can hit autos, you don't lose. That's why they're so dominant in the game mode. Why it's been one of the biggest issues with the game is the metagame of those particular gods. Hunters are gods that excel at single target damage. That is what they are designed to do. Pick a target, whether it's an objective or a enemy player. The point of them is for them to do as much damage to that single target as possible, and that's what they excel at doing. And you see why they're so dominant in Duel, because that is a meta that is solely based on single targets. And if you're a god that's good at doing that, obviously you're going to be good at the game mode, because that's the meta game. Is to be dominant at securing single targets, which means either killing your opponent, taking an objective, or doing both, which is obviously the idea. You want to kill somebody, take the Bull Demon, kill somebody, take their tower, take their Phoenix, take their Titan, etc. All those things, and it's about a single target. And that's how it is. So that comes to why Duel is unbalanced, is because in Conquest, those gods don't function the same way. Single target damage is, yes, part of that metagame, but it is not the sole meta of Conquest. In Conquest, you have to think about, how does this god work in this comp? What are this god's weaknesses? How can the enemy team exploit that god's weaknesses? How am I in a team fight? Am I vulnerable to being ganked? Can I farm safely without being ganked? Blah, 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 etc. And that is why hunters are so weak, for example, in the early game. Because at that point, they're just about farming. And most of the time, they're not going to be fighting single target. They're going to have support at them. They might have the jungler ganking them. They might have both the support and the enemy ADC in the lane at the same time. They can't be as aggressive, and it's harder for them to be able to pick a single target to focus on. You're about farming, and then later you start to transition into more of that single target attitude, because you have such a high amount of damage at that point. You're focusing on single targets. You want to find a player out of position, pick them off, and kill them as quickly as you can. Hunters are great at that. But because of how the meta works in Conquest, the metagame works in Conquest with how it's changing, how there's different changes throughout a single match, and how there's so many things you have to think about. They're not nearly as dominant in the mode. And because Conquest is the game mode, gods are balanced based on that. Which is why you cannot balance Duel without making those gods unplayable, almost. I always come back to that. People think about matchups and all that, and I'm like, that's not why hunters as a class are a lot stronger in Duel, because of Duel's metagame. Not because they're just, those particular gods are just too strong. That's the point. And you can't. And some people have the ridiculous idea of making gods work differently in different game modes, and that you can't do that. Can you imagine how much of a nightmare that is for them to actually bother doing? Like, I mean, it's terrible. And we also come back to why mages are so dominant in the Duel game right now. Of course, that comes from item changes, and a lot of them have become very strong. They have a lot of sustain options that they used to not have. Which leads to them surviving longer, being harder to kill, which means they can kite you more. You hate everything. Of course, mages function differently. They do not line up as well in the metagame of Duel. That is because they're gods that are about kiting, about doing AoE damage, about pushing waves and farming. They're not so much about single targets. Of course, they can become good single target killers because of the itemization in the game being much stronger for mages than it used to be. And of course, that makes it very frustrating for melee-based characters because they can't get near you and they take a lot of damage if they try to. Which is the same way for how hunters work, but they're based on a different idea, which is doing a lot of single target damage. And if you're one-on-one trying to fight them, obviously you're at a disadvantage because they're a single target killer, you're not. So that's what happens. Of course, warriors can be dominant in the same idea of they do a lot of damage and they're very difficult to kill. The difference between them and mages, and why they're not usually as good, is because they're very vulnerable to simple ideas like slows, knockbacks, long-term stuns, etc. Except for Tyr, because, well, his passive directly counters crowd control, but that's an edge case that doesn't really apply very well. He's also really vulnerable to slows, though, so it's like, what are you going to do? Of course, that's the main problem warriors have. If you can keep them away from you, then they lose automatically. Because they're based on boxing targets and getting pressure. And it's hard to do that when the person you're trying to get pressure on can kill you very quickly. Assassins sometimes have it better because they are more oriented toward being able to kill a single target, but they usually need help to do it. Because they're usually all based on burst, and if that burst runs out, then they're in trouble. That's why they usually need a teammate for ganking. That's why it's called ganking, because there's more than one person. It's a gang attack. So yeah, but bottom line is the reason certain gods are, quote, overpowered or broken in Duel is not because, it's not always inherently because of the gods themselves. There are some gods we can argue that. Of course, Habwa, Freya, Kali, Pele in certain situations. We can argue that, but those gods are inherently designed to be. Those gods are just designed really strongly. It can do multiple things well. That's the problem with gods like Habwa, is he's really good at single target damage, but he's also good at kiting his targets and keeping his distance and being difficult to kill, which is a terrible combination for a god to have because it makes them nearly unstoppable. But that's just how he is. He has to be that way because in the other modes he is very vulnerable to being ganked. Single target he can handle, but if he's got multiple targets, what's he going to do? His damage areas are too small for him to be able to handle multiple targets. So he dies pretty quickly. And then AMC has the issue of he's a good single target fighter, but he has terrible mobility. So gods with better mobility can gank him easily, and then he just dies because he can't run away. But if it's just a single target, it's much easier for him to control them. Because he has some of the best qualities of a mage and a hunter, and that's just annoying to deal with. But again, top picks are mainly edge cases. Most of the reason why certain gods are better in Duel is because of Duel's inherent metagame being better suited to certain types of characters than is to others. And while in Conquest it's the opposite. Generally it's warriors and assassins and guardians that are the most dominant classes. In Duel it's the opposite. I said the opposite twice. Alright. I mean, you get the idea. It's based on metagames. It's not on gods themselves, and people need to get over this idea of thinking that you can somehow balance all the game modes at once, because you can't do that. You just can't without severely altering the existing mechanics of the game. Anyway, that's my rant today, guys. So thanks everybody for watching. Like and subscribe if you did. If you did enjoy that. Leave a comment down below if you like about the current state of the game, about the new update, anything really about Smite that you might want to add to the discussion. And I'll see you guys for some more Smite. Have a good one.